The silk tears from collarbone to hip and 200 people in evening dress turn at once. Nobody breathes wrong. The cello holds 2 extra notes before it stops. The woman in the ruined dress does not cover herself. She does not flinch. She looks down instead at a square of paper folded in quarters lying face up on the parquet, between her shoe and the shoe of the woman who tore her open. That paper was never meant to be in this room. A hand in a lacquered manicure reaches for it first. Somewhere behind the chandeliers, a man who owns half the city goes very still. Along the wall, an older woman in a service uniform sets down an empty tray because she already knows what this costs and who will pay it. 3 seconds pass. The woman in the torn dress lifts her chin and opens her mouth, and the room leans in to hear a name it does not expect. The silk gave way with a sound like a struck match. Sharp, wrong. The kind of noise a room hears a half-second before it understands what it heard. 6 hours earlier, none of it had happened yet. The service corridor of the Ellsworth smelled like scorched butter and floor wax, and Wren Callister stood in it, holding a black uniform dress on a wire hanger, thinking that she had made a mistake, and it was too late to unmake it. "Arms up," Loretta Pike said. "I can dress myself." Everybody says that. Then they walk out on my floor with the collar riding up their neck like a man being hanged, and it's my name on the shift sheet. Loretta looked at her over the top of her glasses. "Arms up." Wren put her arms up. Loretta Pike was 62 years old and built like a woman who had spent 3 decades carrying things other people set down. Silver hair pinned tight, forearms like rope. She moved around Wren with the impersonal efficiency of a nurse tugging the fabric, snapping the seams straight, and Wren stood there in a borrowed dress feeling more exposed than she had felt in years. Which was ridiculous, because she was the reason this event existed at all. That was the trouble with the whole arrangement. She could never explain it in one sentence. "You're wearing something under that," Loretta said. "Green. It's silk. I'll be changing after. Somewhere nice. My husband's picking up at midnight. He's got opinions about the uniform." Loretta snorted, and that was the end of it. And Wren felt the small hot relief of a lie that hadn't been a lie exactly. "You've done this before," Loretta said. It wasn't a question. "A few times." "Where?" "Different cities." Loretta made a small noise in her throat, filed it away, and did not ask again. That was the first thing Wren liked about her. The second thing came 30 seconds later. Hand. Loretta held out her own palm up. 3 fingers under, thumb on the rim, but light, light. You're not gripping it, you're agreeing with it. Agreeing with it. The tray wants to be level. Let it. She set an empty tray on Wren's palm and let go. "Now walk to the door and back." Wren walked to the door and back. The tray stayed level. She felt absurdly a flicker of pride, the kind she had not felt since she was a child, and got a horse to stand still for her. "Not bad," Loretta said. "Now the part nobody teaches you." "Which is?" "People think this is the invisible trade." Loretta straightened Wren's collar with 2 fingers. "It isn't. It's the noticing trade. You'll see everything tonight. Every one of them will forget your face by the time you reach the next table. That's not an insult. That's the job." She stepped back. "Some nights, it's a gift." And Wren, who had come here specifically to see things, felt the floor tilt very slightly under her. Because Loretta Pike had just described, in a few seconds, and without knowing it, the entire architecture of Wren's adult life. Her grandmother had built the Halloway Foundation out of a 2-room office and a Rolodex in 1983, and had run it for 40 years, and had died on a Tuesday in March, with a legal pad on her lap. Wren had been 26. The board met on Friday. By Friday afternoon, she was chair. 26. She could still remember the particular quality of the silence in that room. Not hostile. Worse. Polite. So she had done the thing that made sense at the time and had never stopped making sense since. She kept her name off the letterhead. The foundation's chair was listed as a trust office and a mailing address. Grants went out. Reports came back, nobody asked, because nobody wants to interrogate free money. And once a year, sometimes twice. Wren Callister put on somebody's uniform and went to look at where the money landed. Not because she distrusted people, because paper lies more slowly than people do, and she had learned to read paper first. Callister. Loretta was holding out a small black apron. You listening? Sorry. I said don't take anything off the seafood tower unless Fenwick tells you. He gets strange about the seafood tower. Who's Fenwick? Man in the gray suit who's going to sweat through it by 9. Loretta tied her own apron with a movement, so practiced, it looked like a card trick. 12 of us on tonight. 6 regulars, 6 agency. Your agency. Stay near me, don't run, and if a guest touches you, you step back and you find me. You don't handle it. You find me. Does that happen? Loretta looked at her for a moment. Not unkindly. 1,200 people a year come through that ballroom, she said, statistically. Then she pushed open the service door, and the noise came in. The Ellsworth Ballroom at 8 o'clock was a chandelier factory, running at full capacity. Light came down in broken pieces. 240 guests moved under it in that slow circular drift that only happens at charity events where nobody is going anywhere, but everyone is going there deliberately. The Holloway Foundation had underwritten this gala for 9 consecutive years. Its money paid for the room, the flowers, the string quartet, playing something safe in the corner, and the 18 shelter programs that would be named from the podium at 9:45 by a man who had never visited one. Wren knew that because she had read his remarks. She had also read the invoice for the flowers, which was the reason she was here. She moved along the wall with a tray of champagne and let the room come to her. That was the trick Loretta hadn't mentioned, but clearly knew. You don't cross a room like this. You let it wash past, and you count what it carries. It carried the usual. Men in good tailoring, standing in loose triangles, each triangle organized around whoever had the most liquid capital. Women in dresses that had required a fitting appointment. A photographer working the perimeter, hunting for anyone worth 2 frames. And near the center, holding a glass he was not drinking from Corbin Cray, 34 years old. Chief executive of Cray Dynamics. He had the kind of face that photographs beautifully and holds nothing. And he was working the room the way a man works a slot machine on his last $20, smiling, moving, his eyes going to the door every minute or so, like he was waiting for someone, or afraid of someone, and had stopped being able to tell the difference. Wren had never met him. She knew his signature, though. Or rather, she knew that she didn't. Because, for the better part of a year, the Holloway Foundation had been routing its event logistics, its facilities, contracts, and a line item called Operational Advisory through a vendor management outfit, and that outfit was a subsidiary of a holding company, and that holding company sat 2 floors down from Cray Dynamics and shared its general counsel. None of which was illegal. All of which was, in her grandmother's phrase, an awful lot of hallway between the money and the meal. She circled the room, refilled where she was waved at, and came back around the long way. At 9:15, Loretta found her by the coffee station and said without preamble, "You're staring." "I'm working." "You're working at one man." Loretta stacked saucers. "It's fine. He's pretty. He's also engaged to the loudest woman in this building, so admire from the wall." "I'm not." Wren stopped, adjusted. "Have you worked his events before? 4 or 5? Does he sign for things at the end of the night?" "The count sheets." Loretta paused with a saucer in her hand. It was a small pause. 2 seconds. But Wren had spent 3 years learning to read pauses in board meetings, and she caught this one like a dropped glass. "No," Loretta said. "He's got a stamp." "A stamp?" "A little brass thing, sits in a leather box. Kid from his office brings it, presses it on the page. Page takes it home." Loretta set the saucer down. 31 years I've been doing this, and I've had exactly one client who wouldn't put his own pen on his own paper. And there it was. There it was handed to her by a woman in orthopedic shoes at a coffee station after months of Wren staring at bank routing sheets until her eyes went gluey. "Where do they keep the count sheets?" Wren asked, and heard her own voice come out too fast, too even the voice she used on conference calls. And she watched Loretta hear it too. Loretta looked at her a beat longer than she needed to. "Wine store," she said slowly. "Off the back hall. Fenwick keeps the clipboard on the shelf by the door." "Thank you." "Callister." Wren was already turning. "Whatever you're doing," Loretta said, "there's 12 of us on tonight, and the hotel's contract with this foundation comes up for renewal in March. You understand what I'm telling you?" Wren stopped. She understood exactly what she was being told. She understood it in the specific granular way that only someone who has read a renewal clause can understand it. 12 people. 1-line item. "I'm just getting ice," she said, which was the first real lie she had told anyone all night, and it came out of her so smoothly that she felt unwell about it for the next 4 steps. The wine store was cold and smelled like cardboard and old cork. She found the clipboard in seconds. She found the delivery reconciliation underneath it in half a minute. And then she stood in a walk-in cooler in a stranger's uniform and read a single page that made her hands go cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. The page listed what came in. Cases of wine, by varietal, by count. Beside it, in a second column, what had been invoiced to the Halloway Foundation. 14 cases delivered. 61 cases billed. She read it again, because that's what you do. You read it again, you look for the explanation. You assume you're the idiot, because you have been the idiot before, and the humiliation of it lives somewhere behind your sternum forever, except there was no second delivery line, and no credit memo, and no adjustment. And this was one page from one night for one category at one event. 9 years, she thought. 9 years of galas and site visits and grant cycles and 18 shelter programs, getting what was left after the hallway took its cut, and she had signed off on every single one of them, because the summary sheet balanced and the summary sheet always balances. That's what a summary sheet is for. Stop. Breathe. She breathed. Her phone was in a locker on the far side of the kitchen, powered off since 7 behind a hotline running at full tilt, with 26 people moving through it. 9 minutes there and back, minimum, and Fenwick was in the back hall doing his rounds. She did not have 9 minutes, so she did the stupid thing. The obvious human stupid thing. She reached under the collar of her uniform into the inner pocket sewn at the breast of the dress she was wearing beneath it. Deep green silk, hand-finished, the only genuinely extravagant object she owned, and she slid the folded page inside and pressed it flat. 4 inches of fabric between that page and the rest of her life. She would remember that later. She would remember it a great many times. At 9:40, a woman in red snapped her fingers at the air. Wren was 3 steps away, and the sound landed on the back of her neck like a flicked rubber band. Saskia Ardley was 27 years old and had the kind of beauty that photographs demand and rooms resent. Media family. The father, Hollister, 61, stood 8 feet away, pretending to listen to a state senator while keeping one eye on his daughter, the way a man watches a pot he knows is going to boil over. Saskia did not look at Wren when she ordered. That was standard. Wren had been not looked at by professionals. More, Saskia said to the air. Of course. She brought it, set it down, and began to withdraw. Wait. Wren waited, and Saskia turned and looked at her properly, which was the part that never happens, and Wren felt the change in barometric pressure before she understood the reason for it. Because Saskia Ardley was not looking at a waitress. She was looking at a woman's posture. And there was nothing on earth harder to fake or to hide than the way a person stands when they have never once in their life been afraid of losing a job. You're new. I'm agency, ma'am. That's not what I asked. Corbin Cray materialized at his fiancée's elbow with a smile stapled to his face. Sask, the Ardley table's waiting on you. In a minute. Now would be. In a minute. She didn't look at him either. She kept her eyes on Wren, and something in her expression was working, arriving somewhere. You've been watching him. Wren's mind went completely blank for 1 full second. Because she had been watching him. All night. Openly. Professionally. With the total confidence of a person who believed herself unseeable. Which was, she understood with a lurch, exactly what Loretta had warned her about. The room forgets your face. Until it doesn't. I'm working, ma'am. You're staring. I'll stay clear of the table. Don't manage me. Saskia stepped closer, and her perfume arrived, first heavy and floral and expensive. I know your type. You come to these things, you take the shift, you find the man with the watch, and you smile at him like you're drowning. Corbin's smile developed a hairline crack. Saskia, am I wrong? And here is the thing Wren would think about for weeks afterward, at 3 in the morning, in the ugly clarity of a dark bedroom. She could have ended it right there. 4 words. My name is Callister. 4 words and a lifted chin, and Saskia Ardley would have folded like a lawn chair, and the page would have stayed folded against her ribs, and Loretta Pike would have finished her shift, and driven home, and made toast. But there was a renewal clause in March, and there were 12 people on tonight, and the page against her chest was worth more than her dignity arithmetically, morally, in every column she could think to run it down. So Wren Callister lowered her eyes to the floor the way you're taught and said, I apologize, ma'am. And Saskia Ardley, who had been braced for a fight and got courtesy instead, went white around the mouth with fury. Because there is nothing a certain kind of person hates more than being handed exactly what they asked for. Look at me. Wren looked at her. Say it again. I apologize. Like you mean it. Somewhere behind. Her Wren registered movement, Loretta coming down the perimeter fast for a woman with bad knees. A young server, frozen with a tray of tarts. Fenwick turning. The quartet still sawing away at something in 3/4 time, and 240 people, beginning in that slow ripple, to sense that something had gone off in the room. I mean it, Wren said quietly, and Saskia's hand came up. It wasn't a slap. A slap would have been an accident of temper, and it would have been forgiven by everyone in that room by breakfast. Her fingers hooked into the neckline of Ren's uniform, found the softer fabric underneath, and pulled. The green silk tore from collarbone to hip. That sound. Bright, dry, obscene in a room full of violins. The quartet stopped. Not all at once. The cello held on for 2 extra notes, which somehow made it worse. Ren did not move. She stood in the wreckage of a dress her grandmother had bought her in a shop on a rainy street 4 months before she died, with her shoulder bare to the air, and 200 faces turning toward her in sequence, like a wave in a stadium. And she did not move, because moving would have meant deciding, and she had not decided yet. Then she looked down. The page lay on the parquet between her shoe and Saskia, folded in quarters. Face up. 2 columns of numbers in blue ballpoint, and the top line legible from 6 feet away. And Ren Callister's face changed. It was the smallest thing. A tightening at the jaw. A single beat of stillness where before there had been 30 seconds of perfect, unshakable blankness. But Saskia Ardley had spent her entire life reading exactly one thing well, and that one thing was other people's weakness. She bent down and picked it up. "What's this? Give it back." "It's paper." Saskia turned it over, and her eyes went to Ren's face, then back down, then up again, and a slow, delighted, uncomprehending smile spread across her mouth. "You want it. Give it back to me. Say please." And that right there was the moment. Not the tearing, not the insult, not the shoulder or the silk or the 200 faces. The moment was a 27-year-old woman holding a year of Ren's work between 2 lacquered fingernails and not knowing what it was, and knowing only that it mattered. Ren felt something in her chest go very quiet and very level, which is when a hand closed around her arm from behind. Gently. She knew the hand before she turned. She had known it for 4 years. Thaddeus Cray was 38 and had the unnerving quality of seeming to have been in a room slightly longer than he actually had. He was not handsome the way his cousin was handsome. He was taller, and his features were arranged with less generosity, and he had the eyes of a man who had run the numbers on you before he sat down. He said nothing. He shrugged out of his dinner jacket and put it over her shoulders, and the weight of it was so familiar. The warmth, the faint cedar of it, that Ren's eyes stung for the first time all night, which she resented enormously. Corbin Cray made a sound like a man stepping into cold water. Thaddeus. His cousin didn't look at him. Thaddeus was looking at Saskia Ardley, and Ren watched him assemble the next minute behind his eyes. The words, the sequence, the ruin. She had seen him do it to grown men across a conference table. He would say 4 sentences, and Hollister Ardley's stock would open down double digits, and Saskia would never be invited anywhere again, and it would be over, and Ren would be a woman who had been rescued. His mouth opened. Ren put her hand on his wrist. Just that. 2 fingers on the inside of his wrist where his pulse was going like a bird. He stopped. And in the silence, Ren stepped past him. Half a step. Not much. Enough that the jacket slid down off one shoulder, and the torn green silk showed, and she let it. "You asked me a question," she said. Her voice came out clear, and it carried because the Ellsworth Ballroom was built a century ago for exactly this kind of acoustic, and because 240 people had stopped talking in order to hear it. Saskia blinked. "What? You asked if I knew who you are?" Ren held her gaze. "I do. You're Saskia Ardley. Your father owns 4 regional networks and a media group. Your engagement was announced in March. Your table tonight is $110,000, and it was comped. The last one landed. Ren watched it land. And I know who he is. She went on, tipping her head very slightly toward the man beside her. Everyone in this room knows who he is. That's the easy one. She let it sit for a second. The question you forgot to ask, Ren said, is who I am. Fenwick, somewhere off to the left, had gone the color of oatmeal. My name is Ren Callister. She heard the words leave her mouth and felt very distinctly a door closing behind her, permanently on 9 years of being nobody in a room. 3 years ago, I became chair of the Holloway Foundation. I've held the position anonymously since I was 26, because I was 26. A breath. The Holloway Foundation has underwritten this gala for 9 consecutive years. It paid for that room, those flowers, that quartet, and the table you were comped. 240 people made a sound together. Not a gasp. Something lower and more animal than that the noise a crowd makes when the story it has been telling itself collapses, and a new one has to be built at speed. Hollister Ardley set down his glass. I've worked a dozen of these events, Ren said, in this uniform, because I have never once been able to tell what's actually happening in a building from a summary sheet. She held out her hand, palm up, steady. Now give me back my page. Saskia stared at her, and for one enormous, terrible second, Ren thought she had won. She could feel it in the room. The tide going out. The photographer's shutter starting up in a stutter along the wall. Saskia's arm beginning mechanically to move. Then Corbin Cray reached over and took the paper out of his fiancée's fingers. It was such a small motion. Almost tender. He did it the way you'd take a lit cigarette off a sleeping person. He glanced at it. One glance. Half a second. And Ren, watching his face, understood 2 things at once, and with total clarity. He knew what it was. He had known before he looked. There's been a misunderstanding, Corbin said pleasantly, and slid the folded page into his breast pocket. Ms. Callister, I think everyone here owes you an apology, and I intend to make sure you get one properly. Not like this, not in front of a small gesture, taking in the room, the wreckage, the whole burning house. Let's not do this here. He was already turning, already steering Saskia by the elbow, already speaking to Fenwick over his shoulder about cars. Ren stood in the middle of a ballroom in a torn green dress with a billionaire's jacket sliding off her shoulder, and 240 people looking directly at her face, which they would now never forget, which was the entire and only thing she had ever had. She had spent it, all of it, in one transaction, and she had gotten nothing. Off to her left, near the service door, Loretta Pike stood with an empty tray held level at her hip, 3 fingers under, thumb light on the rim. She was not looking at Saskia. She was not looking at the Crays. She was looking at Ren, and she was shaking her head very slowly, the way you do, at someone who has just done a thing that cannot be walked backward. 12 of us on tonight, she had said, and the contract comes up in March. Ren opened her mouth, but Loretta had already turned away, and the service door was already swinging shut behind her, and the string quartet, God Help Them All, had started playing again. The video went up at 12:41 in the morning. Not the whole thing. That was the problem. That was always going to be the problem. And Ren understood it before her coffee was cool, sitting at her own kitchen island, in a bathrobe with a laptop open, and her hair still pinned the way Loretta had pinned it. The clip ran 51 seconds. It opened on Ren's face. Mid-sentence. Chin-up, eyes level, saying something the audio didn't quite catch. In a torn green dress with a man's dinner jacket half off her shoulder, and 200 people watching her like a stage. Then Saskia Ardley from behind one arm, rising. Then the tear. Then Ren again, perfectly composed, not a tremor, saying the words, "My name is Ren Callister," into a silent ballroom. 51 seconds, beautifully cut, and it was missing the 30 seconds before it. The finger snap. "Don't manage me. I know you're Say it like you mean it." All of it gone, scraped clean off the front of the clip like frost off a windshield. Which meant that what the internet woke up to on a Sunday, with nothing else going on, was a video of a very calm, very well-spoken young woman in a torn dress, announcing that she was the secret chair of a foundation to a room full of very rich people, at a party she had apparently attended in disguise. Ren watched it 4 times. Then she got up, walked to the sink, and stood there with her hands on the counter. Because it was good. That was the awful part. It was so good. Somebody had watched 2 hours of raw phone footage from a dozen angles and had found the exact 51 seconds that made her look like a woman executing a plan. By 6 in the morning, it had a caption. By 8, it had a name. The Waitress Who Wasn't. By 9, an Ardley-owned regional network had a 2-minute segment with a graphic and a woman with excellent hair, explaining to an audience of 400,000 people that heiress goes undercover was the kind of stunt that raised very serious questions about how non-profits spend donor money, which was Ren thought sitting on the floor of her kitchen with her back against the dishwasher, a magnificent piece of work, because it wasn't a lie. Not one sentence of it was a lie. She had gone undercover. She had concealed her identity for 3 years. She had technically spent foundation money attending a foundation gala in a foundation-funded ballroom. Every fact true, every fact load-bearing. And the building they'd made out of them had her locked in the basement. Her phone rang at 9:20. She didn't pick it up. It rang again at 9:22. At 9:26 she answered because it was Thaddeus, and he would otherwise simply appear, which he had done before, and she was not dressed for it. "Don't," she said. "I haven't said anything." "You're about to say a number." A pause on the line. 11.4, he said. "Ardley Media at the Open. Their board is all ready. Thaddeus. I'm reporting weather. I'm not making it rain. You're standing outside with a hose," which got a sound out of him. That was almost a laugh, and then a long silence, and then his voice came back, changed lower. The voice he used at 2 in the morning when nobody was billing anyone. "Ren, come here, or let me come there. I need to think. You've been thinking since 4. I can hear it." She closed her eyes. "He has the page," she said. "I know." He took it out of her hand, like he was taking a knife off a toddler, and he did not look surprised. Nobody looks at a delivery reconciliation and understands it in half a second unless he's read one before. Unless he's read that one before. Another silence. Longer. "Then we go get it," he said. And here is where it went wrong, and she knew it was going wrong even as it happened, the way you know a glass is going off the edge of the table before your hand gets there. "Go get it how?" "Ren. No, say it out loud. Say the sentence." She was standing now. She didn't remember standing. "Say the actual mechanism. Because I've watched you do this to 4 men, and every time it starts with, 'I'll handle it,' and ends with somebody's grandchildren losing a house. That is not. 340 people work at Cray Dynamics." 410, he said. "And I don't intend to. You always intend." The line was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to do nothing?" he said. "Is that what you're asking me for? Because I'll be honest with you. That isn't a thing I know how to do." "I know," she said. "That's what frightens me." She hung up on her husband for the first time in 4 years and immediately felt like garbage about it, which did not stop her from putting the phone face down on the counter and walking away. The board call was at 11. 9 trustees on a video grid, and Wren looked at all 9 of those faces and understood within a minute and a half that she had already lost the room. Not because they believed the story, because they believed the story would be believed. "Nobody thinks you did anything wrong," said Marguerite Osining, who was 71 and had known Wren's grandmother for 30 years and was the only person on that grid Wren actually trusted. "That's not the concern." "Then what is?" "The concern is that 400,000 people saw it before lunch, and 18 shelter programs have our name on the door." Which was, of course, exactly right. The executive director spoke next. Vaughn Reddick, 50-something good suit a man who had never once in his professional life been the person holding a page. "There's a governance question," Vaughn said carefully. "The chair conducting unannounced site inspections without informing the executive team. I want to be delicate. That's the part that will not survive contact with a journalist." "There's a bigger one," Wren said. "Renuko, 14 cases delivered, 61 billed." She let it sit there in the silence of 9 muted microphones. "I saw it," she said. "1 page, 1 night, 1 category. And that vendor management arrangement came to this board on your recommendation 14 months ago, Vaughn. So let's be delicate about that, too." She watched his face on the screen, and what she saw there was not guilt. That was the thing she would turn over and over for days afterward, lying in the dark. It was fear, not the fear of being caught. The fear of a man who has just realized he was walking on a floor that isn't there. "Do you have the document?" he said. And Wren opened her mouth, and nothing came out. Because she didn't. She had a memory of it. She had 2 numbers she could recite in her sleep. She had a folded page that had spent a few seconds on a parquet floor before disappearing into the breast pocket of a man's dinner jacket in front of 240 witnesses, every single one of whom had been looking at her shoulder. "I'll have it," she said, which was not an answer, and everybody on that call knew it. The hotel moved on Tuesday. She found out the way you find out the worst things, which is sideways from someone who assumes you already know. A woman from the agency calling about a shift Wren had never signed up for, saying, "Oh, and I'm sorry about Loretta." Wren said very calmly, "What about Loretta?" The Ellsworth's statement was 4 sentences long and had clearly been written by a lawyer at speed. It expressed regret regarding an incident at a private event. It confirmed that the banquet supervisor on duty had been separated from the property effective immediately following an internal review of shift protocol. Separated from the property. Like a tooth, like a barnacle. They hadn't touched Saskia Ardley, who was a guest. They hadn't touched Wren, who had a foundation and a lawyer and a face that was currently on 400,000 screens. They had reached down into the one part of the ledger where nobody was watching, and they had taken out the 62-year-old woman who had made the schedule. 31 years. Wren drove out there on Wednesday. She did not call ahead, because if she called ahead, she would be told not to come, and she would have obeyed, and she needed very badly not to obey. The building was on the east side. Brick 4 stories, no elevator. Loretta was on 3. There was a plastic wreath still on the door from some previous December, and a mat that said without irony, "The Pikes." Wren stood in that hallway for a good 20 seconds. Because what do you say? Genuinely. What is the sentence? I'm sorry I got you fired. I was standing right there, and I chose a piece of paper, and by the way, I could have bought the hotel. Stop. She knocked. Loretta opened the door in a cardigan, saw who it was, and did not look surprised for even 1 second. Well, she said, took you a day? Mrs. Pike, Loretta. She stepped back from the door. You're letting the heat out. The apartment was small and immaculate and smelled like toast. 2 recliners, one, clearly, nobody's for a long time. A window with a bird feeder on a bracket outside. And along the whole east wall floor to ceiling on shelves that had been added at some point by somebody who was not a carpenter. Notebooks. Rows of them. Spines out. Black mostly. Some green. Some so old the covers had gone soft and pale at the corners like river stones. Each one had a year on it in silver marker. Wren, who had come here to apologize, stopped in the middle of the room and stared at them, and something moved in the back of her mind, too far off to name. Sit, Loretta said. You want coffee? You're getting coffee. You should throw me out. Probably. Loretta filled the kettle. Sit down anyway. So Wren sat. And for maybe 4 minutes, neither of them said anything at all, and the only sound was water starting to move in a kettle and a bird outside working at the feeder. 8 months, Loretta said, finally. Wren looked up. House policy. 32 years of continuous service, and the full package vests. Health, the pension supplement, all of it. She poured. I've got 31 years and 4 months. 8 months. 8 months. Loretta set the cup down in front of her, and her hand was completely steady, and that was somehow worse than if it had shaken. I started when I was 31. Everett was still working then. I figured I'd do it 2 years. She sat down in the recliner that was hers. He died a long while back, she said, so I kept doing it. Wren looked into the coffee. I'm going to fix it, she said, and Loretta Pike laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, that was the unbearable part. It was warm and tired, and it came from a long way down, from a place that had heard that sentence before, from other people, in other kitchens. Honey, she said, don't. Honey, listen to me. She leaned forward, forearms on her knees, and looked at Wren with absolute directness. You're 29 years old. That has nothing to do with, you're 29, and you've got a foundation, and you've got that man, and in 10 years none of this is going to be the worst thing that ever happened to you. It'll be a story you tell. She shrugged. I'm 62. I've got a bad knee and 31 years and 4 months and a landlord. Loretta. I'm not saying it to hurt you. Her voice didn't rise. It never rose. I'm saying it because you're sitting there, planning something with your face, and I want you to know what you're actually holding before you spend it. Wren set the cup down because her hands had started to be a problem. Why aren't you angry at me? She said. Loretta considered that. I'm plenty angry, she said. Just not at you. You didn't tear anything. I could have stopped it. In the room. I had 4 words. Yes. And I didn't say them. No, Loretta agreed. You looked at that piece of paper on the floor, and you looked at me by the service door, and you did arithmetic. She picked up her own cup. I saw you do it. Took about 1.5 seconds. Wren couldn't answer. Was it worth it? Loretta asked. And Wren opened her mouth to say yes, because it had to be yes, because the entire structure of the last 4 days rested on the answer being yes, except that the page was in Corbin Cray's pocket, and the server it came from had been wiped clean at 4:15 on Sunday morning. She'd had a forensics firm on it since Monday, and their preliminary was 1 paragraph long and said in essence, whoever did this knew where to look. Which left her with nothing. A photograph she'd never taken, a number she couldn't source, a memory, the word of a woman the entire country had watched put on a costume. No, Wren said, it wasn't. Loretta nodded slowly, like a woman receiving an answer she had already been given. Well, she said, at least you can count. The rain started somewhere around 4. Wren sat in her car outside that brick building for a long time, without turning the engine over, watching the water come down. Chilled in sheets, thinking about a wall of notebooks she hadn't asked about. 31 years of them. Her phone buzzed against her thigh. Thaddeus. She let it go. It buzzed again. Not Thaddeus. Unknown number and a voicemail, and she played it with her thumb on the volume because some animal part of her already knew. The voice was old and dry and entirely at ease. Ms. Callister. Hollister Ardley. A pause. Somebody in the background, a door closing. I want to be clear that this is not a threatening call. I don't make those. My lawyers won't let me. A small chuckle, genuinely amused, which was the worst sound Wren had heard all week. I'm calling because we're both about to spend a great deal of money on a fight, and I thought I'd save us the trouble. Rain on the roof of the car. Your grandmother founded Holloway in 1983, Hollister Ardley said. Lovely woman. I met her twice. Wren's hand went cold around the phone. Which means, of course, that I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. And I have a research department. And they're very good. And they had a productive Monday. A rustle of paper deliberate performed. 2006 was a difficult year for your family, wasn't it? No. Your father resigned from a position he'd held for a decade. There was a report. It was never published. I've read it. No. Now I'm told there's nothing in there that would interest a prosecutor after 20 years. But I've been doing this a long time, Ms. Callister, and I'll tell you what I've learned. A breath almost kind. It doesn't have to be a crime. It only has to be a headline. The message went on for another 4 seconds of nothing. Then, you have my number. Have a good evening. Wren sat in the dark car with the phone in her lap and the rain coming down, and her father's face in her head. Her father in a kitchen in 2006, 44 years old, sitting perfectly still at a table with his hands flat on the wood for what she had understood at 9 years old to be a very long time, and understood now to have been about an hour. Nobody had ever charged him with anything. He had simply stopped being invited places. And then he had stopped going out. And then, over about 6 years, he had stopped. She had built her entire life on paper, because paper was the only thing that had ever told her the truth about him. And here was a 61-year-old man on her voicemail explaining that paper doesn't matter, that it never mattered, that all that matters is who gets to hold the microphone. Wren put both hands on the steering wheel, and she started to laugh, which frightened her, because it wasn't the right sound, and she could hear that it wasn't, and she made herself stop. Then she looked up. 3 floors above her in a lit window, a small figure was moving along a wall of shelves, reaching up, taking something down, sitting with it. Loretta Pike at 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening with nothing left to schedule and nowhere to be opening a notebook. Wren watched her for a long moment, and something in the back of her mind, the thing that had been too far off to name, took one step closer. The forensics report came back on the 19th day. Not the 1-paragraph preliminary, the real one. 40 pages, spiral-bound, delivered by a courier who made Wren sign for it at 8 in the morning, while she stood in her doorway in yesterday's shirt. She read it at the kitchen island with a pen in her hand, the way her grandmother had taught her to read anything that mattered. The first 30 pages were what she expected: the vendor management portal, the deletion at 4:15 Sunday morning, credentials used session length, the clean surgical nature of it. Page 32 was not what she expected. Page 32 was an authorization log. Every disbursement over $50,000 routed through that portal in the last year, and beside each one, the approving signature block. See Cray for 11 of them, and for the other 19. The 19 that were larger, the 19 that actually moved money. A scanned image, a brass seal, circular, serif lettering. Cray Holdings authorized signatory office of the chairman. Wren stopped reading. She sat very still for a moment with her pen hovering over the page, and she had the specific bodily sensation of a stair not being where your foot expects it. Because Thaddeus was the chairman of Cray Holdings. Because Cray Holdings owned 41% of Cray Dynamics, which she had known, which everybody knew, which was the whole architecture of that miserable family. The older cousin holding a minority stake in the younger cousin's company as a leash. And because Loretta Pike had stood at a coffee station on the night of the gala and said 31 years, and I've had exactly one client who wouldn't put his own pen on his own paper. Little brass thing. Sits in a leather box. Kid from his office brings it, presses it on the page. Takes it home. Wren put the pen down. She said out loud to nobody no, which was not a fact. It was a wish with a hard consonant on the front. She got to his building at 10. The 44th floor of Cray Holdings had a reception desk made of a single piece of black stone, and a young man behind it, who stood up the instant the elevator opened, because everybody who worked on that floor knew her face now. Everybody in the country knew her face now. Mrs. Cray, Callister. Ms. Callister. He's in a... I know. She walked past him. There were 4 men in that office, and a screen on the wall with a document open on it, and Thaddeus was standing at the window, with his back to the room, listening, which was how he ran meetings, and he turned when the door opened and saw her face and said, "Out." The 4 men were gone, in under a minute. One of them left a laptop. She put the report on his desk. Page 32. He looked at her. Then he sat down and read it. He read it the way he read everything, which was fast, and then again slowly. And Wren watched his face and got nothing, because his face had been engineered over 20 years to give nothing which had once been a thing she found restful, and now made her want to put a chair through the window. Say something. Give me a minute. Thaddeus. Wren. He looked up. In about 90 seconds, I'm going to have to make a decision that is either the best or the worst thing I've ever done, and I would like to be certain first. So give me a minute. She gave him the minute. He picked up his phone and made one call. 4 sentences. The seal log from records physically now, and a duplicate from compliance, and I want them brought by 2 different people. Then he put the phone down and looked at his own hands on the desk. It's mine, he said. I know it's yours. No. He shook his head once. You're asking whether I authorized 19 disbursements to a vendor management company that was skimming your foundation. I did not. I have never seen that entity's name in my life until you said it to me the morning after the gala. Then how? The seal lives in a leather case in a fire safe in records. 3 people have the combination. A muscle gnawed in his jaw. It has been used 94 times this year. I have personally approved at most 45. Wren sat down. Not gracefully. She just stopped standing. Because there it was. The thing she had been circling since page 32, and it was worse than she'd let herself frame it. "So somebody in your own house has been signing your name for a year," she said. "Yes. And the 19 that matter are the ones with your seal on them." "Yes. Which means when I take this to my board—" She stopped, started again. "Thaddeus, if I walk into that room and say the money went out the door under the chairman's authorization, do you understand what happens?" "I understand exactly what happens. They don't hear a forgery. Nobody hears a forgery." Her voice was rising, and she hated it, and could not get it back down. "They hear that the chair of the Holloway Foundation is married to the man whose seal is on the paper. They hear a couple. They hear 9 years and 18 shelter programs, and a woman who put on a uniform to hide the fact that that I have been sitting in that chair for 3 years, while my own husband's office signed off on stop." She stopped. He came around the desk and crouched in front of her, which was a thing he had done maybe 5 times in 4 years, and never in a building where somebody might see. "Look at me." She looked at him. "There is a version of this," he said quietly, "where I fix it before dinner. Don't. Hear the sentence. You've been asking me for the actual mechanism for 2 weeks, so here it is." He held up one finger. "Corbin has a note coming due on the 11th, held by a lender who takes my calls." A second finger. "Hollister Ardley's board has 3 seats up, and 2 of them owe me favors older than his daughter." A third. "And I own 41% of a company that cannot survive a week without its line of credit." "Thaddeus, by Friday, Corbin is out of that building with a box. By the end of the month, Ardley Media is a subsidiary of something with a different name on it. Nobody ever finds out about the seal, because the entity that used it stops existing, and entities that stop existing don't get subpoenaed." He didn't blink. "It works. It would take me 9 days." The office was very quiet. 44 floors down the city went on doing whatever it did. "And Loretta Pike," Wren said. He didn't answer. "Say it. That's not, say it, Thaddeus. In your 9 days, where is she?" He looked at her for a long moment. "She's in the same apartment," he said, "with the same knee, and the same 31 years and 4 months. Yes. I can put money in her account by 3 o'clock, any amount. You know that." "I do know that." Wren's eyes were burning, and she was so angry about it. "And she'll take it, because she's got a landlord. And she'll say thank you. And that woman will spend the rest of her life knowing that she lost 31 years and got paid off by the girl who cost them to her. That's not what it would be. That is precisely what it would be." She stood up. He stood with her. "And I'd be a woman whose husband cleaned it up, which is what every single person watching that video already thinks I am. I don't care what they think." "I know you don't." She put her hand flat on his chest, not gently. "That's your whole life, Thaddeus. It's the best thing about you, and it's why you can't see the shape of this." She went to the window. 44 floors. She could see the Ellsworth from here. She could actually see it, the green copper roof 11 blocks north. "If you burn it down," she said, "the money's still gone. The money's gone either way. No." She turned around. "That's the part. That's exactly the part. If you do it your way, the money is gone, and nobody ever learns where it went. 18 programs got shorted for 9 years, and the entire record of it disappears into a shell company you dissolve on a Tuesday. And if we do it your way," he said, "you go into a hearing with a memory of a number and no document married to the man whose seal is on the file, and they eat you. Probably. Wren. Probably. She laughed, and it came out wrong. Yes, almost certainly. I have thought about very little else for 19 days. He was quiet. Then why? He said. And Wren stood in her husband's office and found for the first time that she had the sentence. Because my father sat at a kitchen table when I was 9 years old and never got a hearing, she said. There was a report. It never came out. Nobody charged him with anything, and nobody cleared him of anything, and he just stopped being invited places. Her voice had gone flat, which was how she knew it was true. He died, having never once been allowed to stand up in a room and answer. Thaddeus said nothing, and I have spent my whole life reading paper, because paper was the only thing in that house that ever told me the truth. She pressed the heel of her hand against one eye. So no, you don't get to make this disappear on my behalf. Not this one. He crossed the room and put his arms around her, and she let him, and neither of them said anything for a while. 9 days, he said into her hair. I know. I could do it in 9 days. I know you could. She pulled back and looked up at him. Don't. She met the lawyers on Thursday, 3 of them in a conference room at $400 an hour, more than she wanted to think about. In 3 different registers. You have an interested party problem, which was a phrase she came to hate the way you hate a song on the radio. Because a chair. Investigating a vendor is governance. A chair investigating a vendor that paid her husband's company is a lawsuit. And a chair testifying about a document she can no longer produce against a family she is in litigation with is not a witness at all. She's a party, and parties don't get believed. Parties get cross-examined. So what does a witness look like? Wren said. The senior one, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain, looked up. Somebody with nothing to gain, she said. Wren went home and sat in the dark and thought about that for 6 hours. She thought about it Friday. She thought about it Saturday in the car on the highway, driving nowhere in particular for 200 miles, because motion was the only sedative that had worked in a month. And somewhere around mile 140 on a stretch of road with nothing on it. She started to laughing, the wrong laugh. The one that had scared her in the rain. Except this time she let it run, because she had just seen it whole, and it was so obvious and so expensive that it was almost funny. She had a thing to give up. That's what she had. That's all she had. The chair. The title. The 3 years and the letterhead, and the vote, and the authority that she had spent her entire adult life being told she was too young for, and had gotten anyway, and had hidden, because she was ashamed of how young she was. Nobody with a title is ever believed about anything. But a woman with no title, no stake, and nothing coming to her. That woman is just somebody who saw something. She turned the car around at the next exit. The special session was on a Tuesday, 5 weeks after the gala, in a room with a long table and 9 chairs and a pot of coffee nobody touched. Wren came in with 1 folder. Vaughn Reddick was already seated, and he had a folder too, and his was much thicker, and Wren looked at it and felt a strange floating calm. Before we begin, Vaughn said, I want to say for the record that I've engaged counsel. Good. He blinked. I mean that, Wren said. You should have counsel. I think you're going to need it. Marguerite Ossining at the far end, said Wren. I'll be brief. She opened the folder, took out 1 page, slid it to the center of the table, and did not push it toward anyone in particular. Effective at the close of this meeting, I'm resigning as chair of the Halloway Foundation, and as a trustee, and from every committee. 8 people made 8 different sounds. Margaret did not make any sound at all. She just looked at Wren over the top of her glasses with an expression Wren couldn't read, and then very slowly she took her own glasses off. "You don't have to do this," Marguerite said. "I do, actually. They will say it's an admission." "They'll say that anyway." Wren sat back. "They said it in March. They said it Sunday. There is nothing I can do this week that doesn't get said." Vaughn had recovered enough to lean forward. "Wren, I hope you understand that this doesn't resolve the underlying—" "I hope it doesn't." That shut him up. "Here's what I'd like the board to understand," she said, and she kept her voice level and slow because she had practiced this in the car for 200 miles. "As chair, anything I say about the vendor arrangement is the word of an interested party. I'm married to a man whose corporate seal appears on 19 of those authorizations." A chair creaked at the far end of the table. Nobody else moved. "Yes," she said. "That's in the forensics. You'll all have it within the hour. I could have sat on that for another month, and I'm not going to." Marguerite's hand had come up to her mouth. "So as long as I hold this chair, I am the story. Every fact I bring gets attached to my name and my marriage and a 51-second video, and none of it ever gets to be about 14 cases and 61 invoices." Wren looked around the table. "As of 5 o'clock, I'm nobody. I have no vote, no title, no severance, and no financial interest in the outcome of a single thing this foundation does." She let that sit. "And that," she said, "makes me a witness." Margaret Ossining, 71 years old, put her glasses back on. "Move to accept the resignation," she said, "with the deepest regret this board is capable of, and to convene a special evidentiary hearing under Article 9. Second, said somebody at the far end. The vote was 8-0. Wren walked out of the building at 5:10 with her badge in her coat pocket because nobody had thought to ask for it. And she stood on the sidewalk in the cold, with the traffic going by, and waited to feel something. Nothing came. Then gradually, something did. And it wasn't grief, and it wasn't fear. It was the exact feeling she'd had at 26, in a room full of polite silence, and it had a name she'd never let herself say out loud. Relief. She got in the car, turned the key, sat there with her hands on the wheel, and she realized she had at that moment precisely nothing. No page, no server, no title, no vote. A husband she'd told to stand down. A hearing in 6 weeks that she had personally invented and would be walking into with a folder containing 1 resignation letter and a memory. 14 cases delivered. 61 billed. Wren said it out loud in the car, twice the way you say a phone number you're afraid of losing. And then she thought about a lit window on the 3rd floor of a brick building, and a woman in a cardigan reaching up to a shelf, taking something down, and sitting with it. Wren pulled out into traffic and drove east. Loretta opened the door with a dish towel over her shoulder and looked at Wren standing there in a good coat, with nothing in her hands. "You've got a face on you." I resigned. Loretta considered this for about 2 seconds. "Well," she said, "come in before you say the rest of it in a hallway." The apartment smelled like toast again. Wren was starting to suspect it always smelled like toast. The toast was simply what the building smelled like, and she found this obscurely comforting, in a way she could not have defended to anyone. She sat in the chair that wasn't anybody's. Loretta poured 2 cups without asking. "How much did that cost you?" Loretta said. "Everything I had, technically." "And what did you buy with it?" "The right to be believed." Wren wrapped both hands around the cup. Maybe. It's not certain. Nothing is. Loretta sat. Say the rest. So Wren said the rest. The seal. Her husband's brass in somebody else's hand for a year. A man who could have ended the whole thing in 9 days and had been told no by his own wife. A hearing in 6 weeks and nothing to bring to it. Loretta listened without interrupting once. When it was over, she got up, took the kettle off and stood at the counter with her back to the room for a while. 14 and 61, she said. I'm sorry. That's the numbers. 14 cases in 61 out. Yes. Which night? The gala. This year. Loretta turned around. Callister, she said. What in the world do you think I've got on that wall? Wren looked at the shelves. Really looked for the first time. Not as furniture, not as background, but as an object. 31 spines. Silver marker. Years running left to right along the wall like a fence line. Something happened in her chest that she genuinely could not name. Those are... She stood up, sat down, stood up again. Loretta, those are diaries. Diaries. Loretta made a face like she'd bitten something. Honey, I have never had one interesting feeling in my life worth writing down twice. She pulled a black one off the shelf. Not the newest. She had to count along with her finger to find it, which meant she knew the order by touch. She put it on the table and opened it, and Wren looked down at a page of a 62-year-old woman's handwriting and felt the floor go out from under her for the second time in 5 weeks. Date. Room. Head count. Staff on shift by name with hours. Deliveries received by category with counts. Times. Signatures collected. A note in the margin, dock warm CK temp on the oysters, told Fenwick. Every line the same. Every page. Every night. 31 years, Wren said. 31 years and 4 months. You wrote down every shift. I wrote down what came in the back door, and who was standing there when it did. Loretta pulled out a chair and sat. Because a long time ago, a man told a room full of people that I signed for 11 cases of liquor that never showed up. And I said I didn't. And he said I did. And there was one of him and one of me. She turned a page flat with her palm. Guess who they believed? Wren didn't say anything. I wasn't fired that time. 8 days suspended, no pay, and Everett's hours already cut. Loretta shrugged. So the following Monday I bought a notebook at the drugstore for $1.19. And you never stopped. You don't stop. You get a system, and then it's just what you do. She tapped the page. Takes 11 minutes at the end of a shift. 31 years of 11 minutes. Wren put her hand over her mouth. Because she was going to say something, and she didn't trust what it was. Because she had spent 19 days and 40 pages of forensics and 3 lawyers at an obscene hourly rate chasing a server that had been wiped clean at 4:15 on a Sunday morning by somebody who knew exactly where to look. And nobody, not one person, not Corbin Cray, not whoever had the seal, not a single soul in that entire architecture of money had ever once thought to wonder what the banquet supervisor did for 11 minutes at the end of her shift. Because who would? Because she was the woman with the tray. Loretta. Wren's voice came out strange. Do you have this year? Loretta reached over without getting up and took down the one on the end. The gala page took up 2 sides. 14 cases. Listed by varietal. Times of delivery. 40 and 4:15. The driver's first name. 2 initials where somebody had signed the dock sheet, and beside them in Loretta's hand driver wouldn't leave the second copy. Said office keeps both now. Odd. Made my own count. Made my own count. Wren read that line 4 times. You knew, she said. I didn't know anything. Loretta closed the notebook, keeping one finger in the page. I noticed. That's different, and it's the only thing I ever get paid for. Then she looked up, and for the first time since Wren had met her, the steadiness cracked. Not much, just at the corners. Is this it? She said. Is this the thing? I think this might be the whole thing. Well, Loretta looked down at the notebook under her hand. Don't that beat all? They worked at the kitchen table for 12 days. Wren brought the invoice records, what she still had access to, which was the public filings, and 9 years of the Foundation's own audited returns, which anybody could pull, which was the beautiful part. Nothing privileged, nothing she'd taken with her. All of it available to any citizen with a library card and a free afternoon. Loretta brought the wall, and they went, year by year. Why you? Wren asked on the second day. 9 years of these. Somebody else must have been on the schedule sometimes. I took them. Loretta didn't look up. Holloway nights paid time and a half, and the girls with kids wanted the weekends. So I put myself down. She licked her thumb, turned a page. 31 years of putting myself down for the night. Nobody wanted. It was the least dramatic thing Wren had ever done in her life. 2 women at a laminate table with a legal pad between them, a calculator with a sticky 4 key, and a pot of coffee. Going cold, cross-referencing the delivery counts in a banquet supervisor's handwriting against the reimbursement lines in a foundation's annual return. 9 years, 14 events and the facility's contracts behind them, and a line item called Operational Advisory that nobody had ever once asked a question about. Every single one of them the same story in different digits. What came through the back door on the left. What got billed to 18 shelter programs on the right. Somewhere on the 6th day. Wren wrote a running total at the bottom of a page and then sat looking at it for a long time without saying anything, and Loretta didn't ask, and after a while, Wren turned the pad around. Loretta put her glasses on. Read it. Took them off. That's a building, she said. It's 4 buildings. It's 40 years of somebody's rent. Yes. They did not speak for a while after that. Corbin Cray called on the 13th day. Not a lawyer. Not an assistant. Him at 6:40 in the morning, which told Wren he hadn't slept. I want to talk. Then talk. Not on a phone. They met in a diner on the east side because Wren picked it, and she picked it on purpose, and he arrived in a $4,000 coat and sat in a vinyl booth and did not take the coat off. He looked terrible. 34 years old and gray under the eyes. You have something, he said. Do I? You've been out here for 2 weeks, in this neighborhood. You resigned your own chair, which is either lunacy or the smartest thing anyone in my family has ever seen, and I've been trying to decide which for 12 days. He turned his coffee cup without drinking from it. So, you have something. Wren said nothing at all, which she had learned from watching her husband for 4 years is the single most expensive thing you can hand a frightened man. Corbin cracked in under a minute. It wasn't mine, he said. The structure, the vendor entity. I didn't build it. Whose was it? I'm not. He stopped, started again. Do you understand what my position is? 41% of my company is held by a man who has wanted me erased since I was a boy. Every quarter I sit in a room and report to his people. Every quarter. That isn't an answer. Reddick brought it to me. He said it fast, like getting a splinter out. Your own executive director, 14 months ago. Told me it was a routine consolidation, told me it would make both sides cleaner. His hand was shaking on the cup, and he put it in his lap. And Saskia's father's group did the placement. Ardley Media has a services arm. Nobody looks at a services arm. And the seal. Corbin went very still. I don't know anything about a seal. Corbin, I don't. I swear to God I don't. And the terrible thing was that Wren believed him entirely because he was not a good enough liar to produce that specific flavor of blankness on purpose. I signed 11 with my own hand, and every one of them I could defend in a room. The rest came through pre-approved. I assumed. He stopped. You assumed your cousin's office was signing off, Wren said. Yes. You assumed it because that's how it's worked your entire adult life. Yes. So you never asked. He looked at the table. No, he said. I never asked. And Wren felt something she had not planned on sitting in that booth, which was a low and unwelcome flicker of pity. Because here was the whole rotten architecture in one sentence. A man too proud to look at the paper in a system designed by someone who had counted on exactly that. What do you want from me? She said. I'll testify. To what? To all of it. Reddick the placement, the services arm, the 11 I signed. He leaned forward. And in exchange, there's no exchange. There has to be an, there is nothing I can give you. Wren spread her hands on the table. I have no title, no vote, no seat. I couldn't get you a parking space at that foundation. That's the entire point of what I did, and you're the first person who's had to find out about it in a diner. Corbin Cray stared at her. Then he laughed. A short, sick, disbelieving sound. You gave it all up, he said. Yes. Because you couldn't win with it. Because I couldn't be believed with it. She stood and put a 10 on the table for the coffee, and he watched her do it, like she was performing a magic trick. Testify or don't, Corbin. It doesn't cost me anything either way. She was almost at the door when he said it. She's going to come see you. Wren turned. Saskia, he said, not looking up. We're finished in case you hadn't heard. Her father cut her loose, statement and everything. He's got a board to save. He shrugged, and the $4,000 coat moved with him. She's got no money and no name, and she's been calling my office every day, so she'll get to you eventually. Saskia Ardley came on a Thursday. She came to the brick building, which meant she had followed Wren or paid someone to, and she stood in that third-floor hallway in a coat that was 6 months old, which for her was archaeology. 27 years old, and she looked 40 in that light. You have 4 minutes, Wren said. I'm not here to apologize. Good. I wouldn't know what to do with it. Saskia's mouth twisted. Everybody wants me to apologize. My father's people wrote one. 11 paragraphs. They wanted me to read it on camera, and I... She stopped. It was so beautifully written. It didn't have one true word in it. So why are you here? And Saskia Ardley, who had never in her life had to ask anyone a real question, asked one. Why didn't you hit back? Wren blinked. In the room, Saskia said. You knew who you were the entire time. 4 words, and I'd have been finished. I've gone over it. She made a sharp, frustrated gesture at her own head. I have gone over it every night for 7 weeks. You stood there. You let me. Why? Ren looked at her for a long moment. "Because there were 12 people on shift that night," she said, "and the hotel's contract came up in March." Saskia stared. "That's it," Ren said. "There's no better version. That's the whole reason." "That's not a reason that's—" Saskia's voice cracked, and she hauled it back. "You let me tear your dress off in front of 200 people over a scheduling contract. Over 12 jobs. 12 strangers. Yes, I don't understand you." And here was the thing. Ren heard herself about to deliver something. She felt it forming some clean, symmetrical line about what stands behind each of them, and she heard how good it would sound, and she stopped. Because it'd been a speech, and this girl had had 11 paragraphs of speech written for her by professionals, and it hadn't had one true word in it. So Ren said the plainer thing instead, and heard her own voice come out too loud in the hallway, and winced at it. "Because I could afford to lose, and they couldn't." Saskia didn't move. "That's all it was," Ren said quieter. "It wasn't noble. I've thought about it for 7 weeks too, and the honest answer is I did arithmetic, same as you'd do at a cash register. And it still cost her her job." "Yes." Ren's throat closed for a second. "It did. So I got the arithmetic wrong, and I've had to live in that." Saskia looked past her at the door with the plastic wreath on it. "Is she in there?" "Yes." "Does she hate me?" "I don't think she thinks about you at all," Ren said. "I think that's going to be the hardest thing you ever get used to." Saskia Ardley stood in a hallway that smelled like toast, and something in her face came apart very quietly, and she turned around and went down the stairs without saying anything else. Ren went back inside. Loretta was at the table with a notebook open and a pencil behind her ear. "That her?" "That was her." Loretta turned a page. "Did she cry?" "Not until the stairs, I think." "Good." Loretta wrote something down. "That's the right order." Thaddeus called that night, and for the first time in 7 weeks, he did not open with a number. "There's a board meeting Thursday," he said. "Cray Dynamics. They want a resolution to liquidate." Ren sat down on the edge of the bed. "Before the hearing. Contingent on it. It's clean Ren. That's the argument, and it's a good one. Patents get absorbed, the name goes away. The recovery action has somewhere to land. And in 18 months, nobody remembers the company existed. And 410 people. 90 days severance. Generous by the standard of these things. 90 days is 13 weeks. She heard herself say it and pressed on anyway. "That's about how long this has taken. Start to finish. That's the whole thing. And it's the amount of time you'd give a woman on their loading dock to find another job." Thaddeus was quiet. "I know that's not an argument," Ren said. "It isn't. No. But I've watched exactly one person actually pay for this so far. And she was the one who wrote everything down." She pressed her palm flat against the bedspread. "Corbin's out either way. He should be. He never asked a question in his life, and it cost 18 programs, 9 years. But the woman on that loading dock didn't do anything. Neither did the 408 people behind her. You're asking me to take the harder path on a company I've wanted dead since I was 22. I'm asking you to restructure it. That's 4 months of work, and everyone in that building will hate every hour of it." "Yes." She listened to him breathe. "I have the votes for the clean version," he said. "I know you do. And you have no vote at all." "I know that too," Ren said. "That's why I'm asking instead." A long pause on the line. "Thursday," he said. "I'll hear the resolution, and I'll table it until after your hearing." A beat. That's not a yes. It's not a no. No, he agreed. It isn't. Loretta straightened up the next morning and rolled her shoulder the way she did when the knee had been at her, and pushed the legal pad across the table. 9 years, she said. It's done. Every line's got a page number and a date, and my initials on it. Wren looked at it. 9 years of theft reconstructed at a kitchen table by a woman the hotel had separated from the property. They're going to ask you to read it out loud, she said, in front of 9 trustees and a court reporter and about 4 lawyers. And Ardley's people will be there, and they will try to make you look confused, and they'll be good at it. Loretta took the pencil out from behind her ear and set it down. Callister, she said. 31 years I've been in a room with people like that. She looked at the wall of notebooks. They've just never once asked me a question. The hearing was on a Tuesday, 11 weeks after the gala. Not a courtroom. Wren had to keep reminding herself of that, and kept failing, because the room they'd taken on the 9th floor had a long table and 9 trustees and a court reporter with her fingers already resting on the keys, and 4 lawyers along the back wall who had billed more getting dressed that morning than Loretta Pike had made in a month. Wren got there at 7. The room was empty and cold, and somebody had put out water glasses. She sat in one of the chairs along the wall, not at the table, because she wasn't anybody anymore, and looked at the empty seat at the head where she'd sat for 3 years. And felt to her own surprise nothing much at all. Thaddeus found her at past. He came in with no coat and no phone visible, which for him was the equivalent of arriving barefoot, and he sat down beside her in a folding chair that was clearly not built for a man of his height. You didn't have to come. I did, actually. He looked at the table. The seal log came back. Both copies. Records and compliance, and they don't match each other, which is its own answer. And 94 uses this year. 41 of them mine. He said it evenly, but she'd known him 4 years. The other 53 by a woman named Vaunelle Osprey, who has worked in my records department for 9 years, and who is being paid a second salary by a services arm registered in a state that doesn't require you to name your officers. Ardley's. Ardley's. Wren closed her eyes. She resigned Friday, Thaddeus said, before I could do anything about it. She left a letter. A pause. It was 4 pages long, and 3 of them are about how nobody ever spoke to her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. You could have made this disappear in 9 days, Wren said. Yes. Do you regret it? He thought about it honestly, which was one of the 2 or 3 reasons she had married him. I regret every hour of the last 11 weeks, he said, and no. The room filled at 9. Vaughn Reddick came in with 2 attorneys and did not look at anyone. Corbin Cray came alone in a suit that fit worse than it had in the diner, and took the chair he was pointed to without a word. 2 lawyers for Ardley Media sat at the end with a banker's box between them, and one of them was smiling faintly at nothing, the way people do when they're certain. Marguerite Ossining called it to order at 9:04. This is a special evidentiary session convened under Article 9, she said. It is not a trial. We have no power to convict anyone of anything. We have the power to make findings to refer those findings to the State Charities Bureau and the prosecutor's office, and to publish. She looked over her glasses. That last one is the one everybody in this room should be thinking about. Wren testified first. It took 40 minutes, and it was not dramatic in the smallest degree, and afterward, she could remember almost none of it, only that she stated her name, and that she had no position with the foundation, no vote, no severance, and no financial interest in the outcome. that she had held one page in a wine store for about 9 minutes, that she could not produce it, that she remembered 2 numbers. The Ardley lawyer stood up for cross with the air of a man collecting something he'd ordered. "You're married to the chairman of Cray Holdings." "I am." "Whose corporate seal appears on 19 authorizations. 53 as of Friday, 19 of them ours." That threw him for exactly half a second. "You concealed your identity from your own executive team for 3 years." "I did." "You appeared at a gala in a hotel uniform." "I did." "And the document you say you found, the one nobody else has ever seen, vanished in a moment of public commotion that you yourself created." Wren looked at him. "Yes," she said. He waited. Because they always wait. Because they're trained to leave the silence open, so you'll walk into it and start explaining, and every word you spend explaining is a word they get to take apart. Wren didn't say anything else. He sat down about a minute later with the expression of a man who has swung at a ball that wasn't thrown. The panel calls Loretta Pike. She came in at 11:20 with a canvas tote bag on her shoulder. She'd bought a jacket for it. Wren knew because she'd been there standing in a department store on a Saturday while Loretta held 2 nearly identical navy blazers up under the lights, and finally said, "This one's got a better button," and paid for it herself in cash, and would not be argued with. She sat down. She adjusted the microphone with 2 fingers. She looked at the court reporter and said, "Do you need me to spell it Pike?" Then she set the tote bag on the table and started taking out notebooks. 1, then 4, then 9, then 14. She stacked them in year-order spines out the silver marker catching the overhead light, and the sound of them going down on that table was the only sound in the room for a minute and a half. The smiling lawyer at the end stopped smiling somewhere around the 8th one. "Mrs. Pike," Marguerite said, "would you tell the panel what these are?" "My shift books. 1 for each year I supervised banquet service at the Ellsworth." "And what's recorded in them?" "Deliveries. By category, by count, with the time they came in, and the name of whoever brought them." Loretta opened the first one flat with her palm. "Staffing. Head counts. Any signature I collected, and any I couldn't." "For how long have you kept them?" 31 years and 4 months. Somebody at the back of the room reached for a water glass and set it down without drinking. "Why?" Loretta looked up. "Because once early on I got blamed for a delivery I never took," she said. "There was one of him, and one of me, and I lost. And after that, I wrote it down." Marguerite Osining, 71 years old, took her glasses off and held them in her hand for a moment. "Mrs. Pike," she said, "would you read the entries for the 14 events on the schedule in front of you?" And so she did. That was the whole thing. That was what 11 weeks and 9 years and 4 buildings worth of money came down to. And it was a 62-year-old woman in a new navy blazer reading dates and counts out loud into a microphone. Her voice shook on the first one. Just the first. March 14th. Ballroom Ellsworth. 210 covers. Delivery received 3:50 p.m. 11 cases, red 4 cases, white. Driver was Ruben. Dock sheet initialed RM. A page turned. That's 15 cases in. The Foundation's counsel read the corresponding line from the reimbursement schedule. 52 cases billed. April 9th. Terrace room. 90 covers. Delivery received 220. 6 cases. A turn. 6 cases in. 31 billed. And on, and on. She read for an hour and 40 minutes. She did not editorialize once. She did not raise her voice. Twice she stopped to say, "I want to be accurate," that one's got a correction in the margin dated the following morning, initialed and read the correction too. Somewhere in the middle of it, the smiling lawyer's colleague began writing very fast on a legal pad and did not stop. Because there is no cross-examination for this, Wren understood that watching from a chair against the wall, with her hands folded and her eyes stinging, you cannot make a woman look confused about a number she wrote down in ballpoint on the night it happened. 11 minutes after it happened, for 31 years, in the same handwriting in books that had been sitting on a shelf in her apartment 3 years before anybody built the entity that stole the money. You can attack a witness's motive. She had none. You can attack a witness's memory. She hadn't used it. You can attack a witness's interest in the outcome. She'd been fired 9 weeks ago and hadn't gotten a dime. At 1:15, Loretta Pike closed the last notebook. "That's all 14, she said. Nobody moved. Then Marguerite Ossining said in a voice that was not entirely steady, "The panel thanks you, Mrs. Pike." The findings ran to 140 pages and were published in full 9 days later, and they named the service's arm again and again until the name stopped meaning anything and started meaning everything. Von Reddick was referred to the State Charities Bureau and to the prosecutor's office, along with 2 officers of the service's arm and Vonel Osprey, who by then had retained her own counsel. Hollister Ardley was not charged with anything which Wren had expected and which she found she could live with. He lost his board 3 weeks later, not to a prosecutor, to his own director's reading. The Cray Dynamics resolution came back off the table in April and died there. What replaced it took 4 months, and nobody in that building enjoyed a single hour of it. Corbin Cray left with a box and no title and a settlement that would keep him in a decent apartment and nowhere near a board again. He testified at the referral and was... Wren was told an unimpressive witness who told the truth. The company kept its name and lost its chief executive and a great deal of its value. 410 people kept their jobs. And on a Thursday in the following spring, the Ellsworth Hotel, under a new operating group, which had been a condition of the settlement, which had been Wren's one specific and non-negotiable ask, reinstated Loretta Pike's service record. Continuous. 31 years, 4 months, and an 8-month gap treated as administrative leave, which meant it vested. The whole package. Health, the pension supplement, all of it. She didn't go back to work. She was 63 by then, and the knee had opinions. But she went in to sign the papers, and Wren drove her, and waited in the corridor outside the personnel office where the light was that particular fluorescent green that every back-of-house corridor in the country has, and where the smell of scorched butter and floor wax came up the hall from the kitchens. Loretta came out after 20 minutes with a laminated badge in her hand. She looked at it for a while. "They spelled it right," she said. "That's something." 31 years they finally spelled it right. She put it in her coat pocket. Then she reached into the tote bag on her shoulder and took out a notebook. Black unmarked, the covers still stiff. She held it out. "What's this?" "It's a notebook, Callister. What do you think it is?" Wren took it. It was heavier than it looked. New paper always is. "I don't work anywhere," she said. "I don't have a shift to write down." "Then write down something else." Loretta pulled her coat straight. "Look, I'm not going to make a speech about it. I'm no good at that, and you'd hold it against me." Loretta. "All I know is nobody wrote any of it down for 31 years, but me." She shrugged and looked down the corridor toward the kitchens, and her jaw moved once. "And if nobody writes it, then it didn't. That's all. That's it." Wren opened the notebook. The first page was blank and lined and waiting. She reached into her coat pocket and took out a square of green silk folded to about the size of a playing card, worn soft at the creases from 7 months of being carried. She laid it flat against the inside of the front cover and closed the book on it. Then the two of them walked out through the service corridor, past the wire hangers and the time clock and the door to the wine store, and out into a gray afternoon where nobody on the street knew either of their faces anymore. Which was, as Wren thought, exactly the point. This story is a work of fiction. All characters' names, businesses, organizations, events, and incidents are products of the author's imagination, or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons living or dead, or to real companies, institutions, or events is entirely coincidental. This story is not based on true events.